So, a couple of things we want to understand and why we want to start to have more confidence in the power of story and metaphor. The neuroscience tells us that just the expectation of a story causes people's brains to entrain. In other words, the minute you get the, either by direct statements like, reminds me of a time when, or inference, have you ever, the brain starts to go into entrainment mode. It starts to synchronize with the brain of the speaker. It's automatic. And what happens is the more the listener understands the story, and by the way, this is done, Greg Stevens and Lawrence Silbert, Yuri Hassan put participants in an fMRI machine and recorded brain activity, one telling a story, the other listening. Researchers discovered that the brains of the two participants began to sync up as the speaker told the story. The listener's brain patterns began to match. Now, here's how it happens. You hear a story, your brain starts to sync up, but there's a lag. Eventually, you start synchronizing at the same speed as the speaker. And then what happens, the listener's brain, especially if they really get the story, the brain starts to speed up. It starts to anticipate what's going to happen next. Now you've got full cognitive absorption. Okay? Remember, what is one of the concepts I started today's lecture with? The human nervous system always accepts that which it creates. It always accepts itself. If your neurology is predicting what's happened next, you've made it up. Therefore, it must be true. Get it? Now, that's going to happen regardless of how good at storytelling you are, as long as they can understand it and they want to listen to you, right? Otherwise, they'll leave the room. So, that being said, understanding identification, understanding absorption, let's look at ways. Oh, by the way, this is also important. This is why adverb-adjective presuppositions are so important in your story. Spanish researchers found that even reading words like perfume or coffee lights up the primary olfactory cortex where we process smell. This is called embodied cognition. If I start talking about the juicy taste of a hamburger, the parts of your brain that activate when you taste a hamburger light up. Your brain doesn't know the difference. This is why we love romances. Right? Chick candy. Right? Okay. So, the technical term for this, by the way, is called neural coupling. Okay. So, that being said, this is all going to happen regardless of whether you know NLP or not. No, it's just going to happen. Okay. So let's look at becoming an NLP story ninja. First of all, psychoneurodynamics. Thorndike effect. People insert themselves into the story. Always happens. You can always count on that. People's brains are going to entrain. People are looking to identify with the character. The more easy you can make that, the faster they become transported. Brain entrainment, talked about that. Transportability, basic key factors that, again, everything we're about to cover presupposes you've covered these bases. Okay? Priming. Let's talk about behavioral template priming. Many times when you create a story, a very adept story architect will build a set of behaviors into the story in the sequence that you want them to take. So let's, for example, I want people to listen to what I say, realize it's for them, rush to the back of the room, pull out their credit card, and buy my product. I will tell a story about somebody, maybe me, maybe somebody else, that went to a seminar, was amazed by the power and saw how powerfully you could affect change with these skill sets, realized it was exactly what you needed, and when I had the opportunity, first chance I got, I rushed to the back of the room, and I whipped out my credit card, and I was a little nervous at first because it was a big chunk of money, and then I realized this is what I've been waiting for, right? And I said, okay, I took a deep breath, handed them the credit card, I got the course, I engrossed myself in the course, and I started doing exactly what was done, and before I knew it, Not only did I make all of my money back, my business kept growing and growing and growing. So by the time 3 months went by, not only had I made out back my significant investment, everything was getting stronger and more money in my bank account. And it was like, man, I remember I look back on that and say how scared I was and so glad I made that attempt. By the way, how absorbed are you in what I'm saying? Right? You couldn't help yourself, could you? You knew it was an example. Right? You knew it was an example.
A very good one.
A very good one. Why? Why was it a good example?
Because everyone can relate to it.
Exactly.
It's relevant after the
Every single person in this room has had that experience at least 5 or 6 times. Today. Right? Now, if we had time, and I would love to do this, and if you come to if we do a CPI2 workshop in 2021 or 2020, you're going to see me do this. We also do this in our hypnotic presentation skills class. Now, everything about you keep hearing me mention this CPI thing. CPI 1, which is that little diagram I showed you, that was the conversational persuasion system that I designed for me. I didn't design any of these things for you. And honestly, if you have CPI, you really don't need much else. But I kept hearing, there were all these other things I was curious about, and I wanted to learn, and I was frustrated every time I went to learn something. It was like one radioactive nugget surrounded by all this fluff. And I got sick of that. I want all the radioactive nuggets in one place. And so I kept combining my nuggets. And I did the same thing for story. I did the same thing for sleight of mouth and conversational reframe. And I did the same thing for presentation. Once you have CPI 1, you can take any of the other CPIs in any order you want. It doesn't matter, because they all presuppose you're familiar with the universal persuasion protocol, which allows you to influence anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance, from the treatment room to the classroom to the courtroom to the bar room to the bedroom. Gives you a formula to follow that allows you to exert maximum influence in minimum time. Once you have that, you don't need anything else, but you always want more, don't you? You always want to take the next step. So CPI 2 is all about strategic story and metaphor training. CPI 3 is all about conversational covert belief change, overcoming objections, things of that nature. CPI 4 is what we call hypnotic presentation skills. It's not a class on stage hypnosis. It's a class about hypnotic persuasion and presentation from the stage. So in CPI 2 and in CPI 4, we deconstruct exactly what guys like T. Harv Eker, in fact, we use his stories as an example. We actually break them apart and show you the structures, the priming, the embedded commands, the presuppositions, and how it primes people to take an action. We just break it apart so you see it. It's one of the most fascinating parts. It terrifies people because they don't realize that there's a system behind the system that they're using with you. So, behavioral priming. Now, at a key moment when you realize you want it, guess what you're more likely to do? Guess what you're more...
According to the priming.
Right? Because you've already done it several times in your mind. Right? Not that there's anything you can buy right now. But that's behavioral template priming. We build into the structure of the story the exact sequence of actions we want somebody to take. And then we surround it with all these colorful descriptors and feelings and meanings and equivalences. And it just gets imprinted in the background of everything else. Another quick example is if, let's say, there's this concept a lot of people think of as like subliminal messaging. Subliminal messaging is not like they would embed the Coke in the film and stuff like that. That only works if the person's hungry. In other words, if I'm talking about the best pizza joint I ever visited, and I'm talking about how I pulled in, I grabbed a slice, I've been out there, oh my God, this was so good. I was so hungry in it, right? And you're driving home, and if you're not hungry, and you pass a pizza joint, you'll probably ignore it. But if you're driving home, and you're hungry, and you're passing a pizza joint, the probability of you stopping at the pizza place goes up. So you have to create a desire in the person for the action that you want them to take if you want the priming to engage. Does that make sense? So that's behavioral template priming. There's another kind of priming that is used a lot, and this goes right to their emotive side, their emotional refractory period. This is called semantic priming. Semantic priming happens when I embed within the story, I overuse words that have a similar or same meta message. You guys remember I talked about meta message in our People Profit class yesterday? Every word, this is David's distinction, every word that you encounter has 3 levels of meaning. There's commonly accepted usage. Did you smash any stars? Right? There's the dictionary usage, to smash, to obliterate, right? And then there's the meta message. It's like when you hear that word, what's the emotional feeling that you get from it? You know, contrast persuasion versus manipulation. You hear those words, you get 2 very different feelings. True, not true? Okay? Semantic priming is about finding a series or a family of words that have a similar meta message or meta meaning. They create in the body a similar feeling. And because it's creating a feeling in the body, it activates emotional refractory period. And so you start perceiving reality through that filter. Right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say we want somebody to completely trust us. Right? We might in our story or in our by the way, this doesn't have to also be in a story. This could be in any form of conversation that you're having. Reliable, trustworthy, dependable, concrete, solid, exact, precise, structured, sturdy, straight, foundational, upstanding. When you hear these words, what kind of a feeling do you get? Powerful, honest, trustworthy? Yes, no? Right? That's the point. If you embed these words throughout your structure and you overuse them, it will create a predisposition in the mind of the person. Right? Now, Steph always corrects me on this story, but there was a study that they wanted to see the effects of priming, and they brought people in, and the way it worked was was it seniors they brought in, or was it just regular people?
College students.
College students. They had a really long-ass hallway.
They're cheaper than people.
They're cheaper because you can't get this fine beer, you don't got to pay them, right? So they go up and had these students walk down this really long hallway, right? And then they would go into a room and they would take a test. And the test had things like Florida and retirement and everything pertaining to old age. And what the scientists were doing is they would measure when these people first came in, they would measure the speed at which they went down the hallway.
Half and half.
Half and half. All right.
Half had test.
He likes to keep interrupting me. Right? But the point is that it was a double blind, right? And then when they were walking out after taking the test, they would measure the speed with which they walked back. And what did they find? Since you want to speak up so much.
In the original study, they found the students who had taken the test that was full of age-related words walked slightly slower than the students who took a similar test with random words.
Right. Okay.
In the replication,
This is what he loves.
when instead of having a scientist with a stopwatch timing them, they use the mechanical devices they use in races to see exactly when you cross a given point, they found there was no difference. The priming effect was on the scientists with the stopwatches.
Somebody got primed either way, right? So the point is that this is, again, one tool. It's not one most people will catch, right? It's, again, so you have behavioral template priming, which, by the way, I think is the most reliable. But you also have semantic priming. Find as many words that have the same meta message or meta meaning as possible and overuse them in your speaking. Doesn't matter, as long as language is involved, this will work. Speech, texting, whatever, okay? And we have games that we play in maybe we'll play a little bit with this in instant conversational hypnosis tomorrow. We'll go through some of the ninja module stuff in addition to the 7 language patterns. But we have this process called word salad where we just force your linguistic centers to overuse these words so they just flow out of you. Okay. Yes?
Does it work if the words are negated in the story?
Well, if we follow basic hypnotic principle is that your brain doesn't process negatives very well. Theoretically, it should be no. But the truth is, I don't know. I've never tested it. If I don't know something, I'll tell you. But it's worth testing to find out. But these are two of the things that got to remember when people know you're trained in this stuff, they start looking for stuff. That's why I tell my students, stay away from the sexy shit in NLP. What's the sexy shit? Embedded commands, thought binds, quotes patterns. These are things that are very, very, they were kind of like the thing that made NLP famous, right? Because they were the shiny new toy from NLP. And because they're the thing that attracts most people to NLP, they're the things that people learn first. And if they know you know NLP, they start looking for it, right? So I developed a technique I call the red herring technique. It's like if I know somebody knows I know stuff, I will deliberately do something badly so they have something to find. And then they get so focused on looking for more of those, they miss everything else, right? This is something...
Yeah, I was just thinking, like what you said, like when you try to explain something to someone and you do a really good job of it, like when you're trying to explain a concept to somebody and you do a really good job of it, but that person is motivated to not understand, they will find like the one error that you made and say your entire thing is wrong because of that.
That's a meta program. We can fix that. Usually with a club to the head. But. Right. So that's semantic priming. And again, now this example is a little bit more earthy, but many, many years ago, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, back in when a lot of this stuff was first being researched, some people in the pickup and seduction world got a hold of this idea called semantic priming. By the way, how many people are old enough to remember a movie called Dr. Detroit or The Couch Trip? All right. In that movie, Dan Aykroyd plays an escaped mental patient masquerading as a psychotherapist who has a radio show. Right? You guys remember that scene? If not, go rent it and watch. It's hysterical. And one of the guys who calls into the radio show, every time somebody speaks or describes something, he gets aroused. He automatically links sexual feelings to whatever. He goes, really? You get even when like you change the oil on your car? And of course, Aykroyd begins to describe turning the nut, lowering the crank, letting the fluid. And you hear the guy go, oh, and you are getting aroused on it, right? Interestingly enough, a product came out, not because of the couch trip, but it was called, the product was called Sensual Power Words. And the person who created this product was at a gun range, of all things, with some friends, and he was teaching them how to clean a gun. And he noticed that as he was describing how to clean a gun, the women started to get a little turned on. And so he got this idea, wow, I wonder if there's more to this. And he started researching it, and he came out with a product called Sexual or Sensual Power Words. So let's say you're a romance writer, or something or you want to sex up your emails or whatever. Right? Remember, sexual and reproductive topics go right to the brainstem. They go right to the reptile brain. You can literally load them up. And it doesn't matter what the context is. The idea is you have an inordinate number of these words in your story, and it will build like nickels in a slot machine until the state engages. But because it's never obvious, they don't know you did it. Interesting, huh? I've got your fucking attention now, don't I? All right. So normally I would assign you to create 6 stories and use those words. So using behavioral template priming and semantic priming. By far, by the way, when I watch professional speakers, like the $1 million speakers, this is the big one. They use behavioral and semantic priming to preload you emotionally on a certain level and give you the actions to take that they expect you to take, built within the structure of the story. Now, the nice part about this is that because it's not, quote, taught in NLP directly, and it's not one of the sexy techniques, even the NLP trainers won't catch it. Just like you got sucked into my version of the story. Right? Even though you knew it, in the first couple minutes I was, oh, David's going to try and imprint something in us. And then 2.5 minutes later, you didn't fucking care. Right? Now we can layer, right? Now, some of this you have to do before you deploy the story. Some of it you can do while you're deploying the story. It's best, especially for beginners with this kind of stuff, to do everything ahead of time. Because as you engineer your stories and you architect your stories, then you're going to overlearn these techniques. They'll become more imprinted in you so that you can actually riff them on the fly whenever an opportunity comes your way, right? In CPI 1, and we'll do a little bit of it in our instant conversation hypnosis class tomorrow, we'll show you how to hardwire these things into your system so that they just flow out of you, right? We won't be able to go through every single technique, but we'll give you the methodology for that. Quotes patterns. Quotes patterns are amazingly powerful. Quotes patterns are basically saying something, but saying somebody else said it, right? And you know, I was talking to my friend Stephanie the other day, and she was talking to one of the people who'd been at our face reading workshop, and they were saying, you know, David's workshop is the most amazing experience a person could ever have. And anybody who didn't go there is just stupid for not being there. And I was really flattered by that. Right? It allows you to create different perspective shifts in the mind of the listener, but the more perspective shifts you take, the less invasive the information seems to be. So you can say very provocative things, and because you've layered it out, it doesn't seem like you're telling them, it doesn't seem like you're installing something, but just like behavioral template priming, the structure of what you've said is imprinted underneath the content you're paying attention to. And so when the opportunity comes, when the environment is right for you to take action on it, you do. And you feel good about it, right? And you think it's your idea, which is even better, right? So again, like we could go deep into this, but that's one of the things, this is one of the sexier ones, but it's not one that a lot of people use really well. But if you can do it in writing, if you can do it from the stage, you're going to get a very, very powerful trance effect on the people. Some examples, my father used to tell me, you don't have to control everything. It's okay, it's safe to relax, right? And I thought, well, okay, if he says so. So you notice how we kind of, we start in first person, we quote, we come back to first person. So it's almost like an embedded command, similar structure. Okay? My friends tell me, loosen up when I go out. Right? I met someone this morning, and he said, you look great today. Right? Sometimes you got to be careful how you hide this. I use shift. I love this technique. I played with this in the copywriting workshops yesterday, backwards and forwards, right? And I was talking about my experience, and then I shift to the editorial you. It's like, you know, sometimes you just kind of droning through the world, not looking for anything in particular, not expecting to meet anyone special, and all of a sudden you just come across somebody who really lights you up inside. It's like for some mysterious reason, everybody in the planet just got blacked out, and this one spotlight was on this person, and it was the perfect fit for you. And even though you kind of resisted it at first, you kind of thought, well, that's kind of weird. After a few seconds, it was like all of a sudden you realize, wow, I really like this person. I want to spend more time with them, right? And maybe there's a part of you that had a little misgivings, but the longer you spend time with this person, the more you realize it was one of the best decisions you ever made. I like how that can sometimes lead to some of the most amazing transformations in our life when you do that. Come out of training. I use shift. I start talking about my experience. I use a window phrase that triggers a neuroassociation. Have you ever? And then I start to describe my experience. And at some point, I switch to the editorial you, a generic you. Right? But my intention is the actual you. Because your neurons are paying attention to what I'm saying, your conscious mind is paying attention to the content of what I'm saying. Your unconscious mind is the master of nonlinear dual processing or multi-level processing. So it opens up a window, it finds every connection or connotation of you, opens up those files, because it doesn't actually know for sure, does he mean the editorial you or does he mean me? The unconscious mind says, well, I can do both, so fuck it, I will. And it does. And your conscious mind spits up to you the most context-specific aspect while it's processing all the others below the threshold of conscious awareness. Okay? You shift. Oops. What time are we out of here?
Yep.
All right. You guys have fun? Cool. We have, I know, I'm about to do the drawing. We're going to have a drawing, right? If you're interested in learning more about the different modules that we've put together and stuff like that, you can go to the website and check out, oops, hold on a second. We're going to do our drawing, so don't go running off. You go to nlppower.com and type in that hot flash code. If for some reason the code doesn't work, just call us. We'll give you the code no matter what. We'll give you the price point no matter what. Okay. Pick a name, Robert. No, not that one. No. Especially not that one. Robert Knight. Okay, I'm gonna do another one.
Let him pick it again, because he...
NLP doesn't include anything.
David, Robert's the only one who's safe to pick another one.
If you pull your name again, I'm kicking your ass. They're all the same. They're all the same? Is that what you did? Arthur Jordan! Come on and get your happiness. See Stephanie? Let her know you won the Mondo package and I'll take that. All right. For those of you who didn't win, I apologize. Come to the next one. We'll be doing another drawing tomorrow for instant conversational hypnosis. I also believe, for those of you who care, I think there's a few more Mondo packages that we're raffling off. So when they do the drawings, auctioning off. Oh, it's auctioning? Okay. So if you guys want a shot at the brass ring, go ahead and place a bid. That being said, did everybody have a good time?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what I used to tell my meetup group when I was actively doing meetups. If you had a great time, post good things to the meetup group. If you didn't have a good time, post to somebody else's. God bless you. We'll see you later. You guys can clap and go now.